Okay, today we're with Major General John Cardwell of the United States Army Reserves. He is Special Assistant to the Commander of the North American Aerospace Defense Command and U.S. Northern Command. First of all, tell us a little bit about your background before you joined the military.
Well, born and raised in Loudon. Matter of fact, I was raised in the house that we're in right now. Went to Loudon Grammar School back then with Mr. Huffine as the principal. Then Loudon Junior High, Loudon High School. I guess your typical, upbringing. Dad was former football coach at Loudon and later worked at Biscay's Union Carbide. Mom worked for the Department of Human Services. And just your typical, childhood here in Loudon, playing sports, Boy Scouts, things like that. And then graduated Loudon in 1980.
Tell us about the process of you joining the Army from ROTC, UT, and...
Well, I always had an interest in going into the military. I think even back to 5th grade, 6th grade, we used to go in the library and pull out the books about Army weapons and sit there and go through and look at it. And of course, being raised in the, during the Vietnam era, and you're always hearing about it and all that. So there's always an interest there. Dad was in the Army during the Korean War, didn't make a career out of it, National Guardsman. Uncle was in World War II, so you'd hear things from that. So in the fall of 1980, I went to UT and joined ROTC right off the bat. And it's just the more that you did it, the more you liked it. And then we had the opportunity to start doing actual Army schools, so not ROTC schools. For example, U.S. Army Airborne School at Fort Benning and Northern Warfare School in Alaska. And then off to summer camp at Fort Lewis, Washington. So the more you did that type training, the more it excited me to want to go into the Army.
Why the Army, not the Air Force or Navy?
I'm not sure. Probably just because, didn't know that many people that were in the branches and that. And just, I don't know, just the Army stuff, that's what you did as a kid. As a kid, you played Army. You didn't play Air Force. You didn't play Navy.
Right.
You played Army. Mm-hmm. And so that was just what sort of grew up with.
Well, tell me a little bit about the time that you had at boot camp, and where was that?
Well, in ROTC, you don't really have a boot camp, but you have what's called an advanced camp. So it's 8 weeks, and it was at Fort Lewis, Washington. And that was in the summer of '83, so it's between your junior and senior year. So you have 3 years at working ROTC, then they'll send you off to that. So that's our equivalent of boot camp. Mm-hmm. So that's where they'll teach you how to shoot, how to do land navigation, but also they focus more on the small unit leadership more than you do at a typical boot camp. So you run in tactical situations, how to take out a machine gun nest, how to react to a sniper, how to conduct an ambush, how to react to ambush, things like that, but as a leader of the unit as opposed to just a member of the squad. And Fort Lewis is quite interesting. It rains about every day there. If anybody's ever been to Seattle in that area, you understand all the wet weather. And we're still in the old World War II barracks, so very no rooms, common one bay, open bay rooms with same thing you see on TV in the World War II movies.
I know you've served in a lot of locations. Simply one of the reasons you've been in the Army a long time now. Mm-hmm. What locations kind of stand out in your mind, and why?
Well, I have to say the very first one to start off with. So my first assignment was in Mannheim, Germany in the late 80s. So still in the height of the Cold War. And so if you were in the Army, that's where you wanted to be. Mm-hmm. That was the, quote, front line of the Cold War, was being in, back then, West Germany. And facing off with the Soviets and the Czechs, across the border from you. So that was just a really fascinating, very interesting. You felt like you said you're on the front lines of the conflict during the Cold War there. And also I was an armor officer, so I was on tanks.
Okay.
And so that was like the ultimate to be in the late 80s, was on tanks facing the Soviets in Germany. So that was probably the first one was really interesting. The second was not really because of location, but more because of the mission we had, was at Fort Bragg. Like I said, now Fort Bragg itself, you know, not that most exciting, but the unit we're in an airborne armor unit. So the only one in the world at the time that we could actually parachute our tanks out of the planes, and then we'd jump out behind them. And then that was the unit I also went to Desert Shield and Desert Storm with. So that one was because of the type unit and the uniqueness of it, and the, you know, jumping out of airplanes and all that fun stuff. And then probably more recently is when I commanded all the Army Reserve in the Pacific. So headquartered in Hawaii, but I had units on 3 different islands in Hawaii, so the Big Island, Oahu, Maui. I had units in Fairbanks and Anchorage, Alaska. I had them in American Samoa, in Guam, Saipan, Japan, and Korea. So covered 7 time zones from left to right, and about 6,000 miles north to south. So just fascinating seeing, number one, the different cultures everywhere you went. That American Samoa is different from Guam, different from Japan, different from Saipan, and just learning the history. You know, got to go to places that, you know, on the battlefields in Guam and Saipan from World War II, of seeing things that you never even thought you'd ever see as a good old boy from Loudon.
Yeah.